This video contains no story spoilers for Tears of the Kingdom and features content found exclusively on the Great Sky Island and opening tutorial. Like many people, one of the first things that enamored me with Tears of the Kingdom has to be the Flux constructs and the constructs in general. While enemy variety was, some would say, lacking in Breath of the Wild, in my opinion Tears of the Kingdom mixes up more enough. And in my experience, the Flux constructs are one of the most creative blocks in the game, quite literally, given their massive ability to make use of almost every single ability in your arsenal and the near limitless ways that you can defeat them and have fun with them. Therefore, given that they're a mech, LEGO loves them, that's why we're staring here at a pile of blocks, because this is the initial test I was running on including Flux constructs in custom set. Now, custom set with Tears of the Kingdom is hard at work on the way, and one of the sets I planned to do was going to incorporate this guy. And originally it was supposed to be a side build, but the reason you're seeing this video is because stuff happened. It was difficult, and for something that's literally made of cubes being translated into the LEGO cube form, I think it's rather interesting. So I'm here to share my suffering and the process that I've gone through so far with the Flux construct. So what you're looking at now is prototype 1, and this is not something we often do, isn't it? It's taking a look at stuff in the still developmental phase, and you can see here that I've got the 27 cubes that make up the Flux construct. The easiest way to do this, of course, was to look at its cube form, which is 3 layers on the bottom, 3 layers in the middle, and 3 layers on the top. And from that, I was able to determine, well, I need a perfect cube. Now, where do I look next? LEGO Minecraft, no less, which of course uses a pseudo-cube system by using a brick with a plate on top. Now, if you want to make an actual cube, as any true LEGO Minecraft fan will tell you, you actually need a plate on the bottom as well to make this a 5 plate by 5 plate of 5 sort of units across cube. And that was accomplished here by using these 1x2 Technic bricks, and if I turn them upside down, you've got a jumper on the top. Now, one of the things about the Flux construct is these cubes have to go in multiple forms, so if this thing was going to be playable at all, I had to make sure that there are attachment points. My logic was that if you wanted to attach the cubes in every way, there needed to be 3 sides which would have normal facing studs, such as one on the top, this Technic pin side here, and what would be a Technic pin side here. And then of course 3 sides with anti-studs, namely the bottom, and in my original version, sides on here. Of course that brick doesn't exist, and we'll come back to that later. And of course they have to be rearrangeable, so it's no use building a static man model when it's got to come into its cube form, and of course its ascend pillar form. And the versatility here is, of course, what's going to sell the set. If you imagine kids being interested in this kind of thing, then of course they're going to want to be able to perform the actions that they see it doing in game, and therefore it has to be rearrangeable because that's the whole goal, and it fits the whole sort of scenario of what we're designing here. So anyway, I came up with 27 cubes, and obviously at this scale they're very, very small. I was thinking I only wanted him to be about 3 or 4 times the height of a minifigure, and this was purely because I didn't want him to be absolutely massive and take up the piece count of what would be otherwise a very small set. If this is going on another set, it has to be a relatively small part of the budget. And as you can see here, all 27 cubes, only 135 parts. Perfect, that doesn't steal away from the set that this was intended to go in. Now, of course, the next trouble was, of course, coloration. Most of the construct sits halfway exactly between dark turquoise or teal and then sand green. So going for sand green here as the closest, and then using this dark orange colour to represent the more coppery versions seen on the higher tier of Flux constructs. I won't be spoiling anything about them as well in this video. Now, of course, how do they construct together? Well, of course, let's go ahead and take a look at what I did next, which was stack them into their various forms. Here you can see these cubes in the cube form and of course in the man form. And one thing I noticed very quickly is that 27 cubes is the perfect amount. You can see here that I've managed to make it work using the very limited studs and anti-studs to connect everything together into arms, the torso, the head, and while one of them isn't specially coloured here, it would be in the final version. However, there's something off about him, isn't it? Something doesn't quite look right. As for other details, the energy was using these transparent stamps which were recolored into turquoise to represent the flowing energy, just as a contrast to this green. Really any of the green shades could work, but I think this one's the coolest of the colours in a sense. However, this is where we hit our first problem, and of course that was obvious from the beginning: stability. This thing is not going to stand up very well. Now there's a chance you could find a sweet spot by repositioning the arms, but the first problem we have with him is the fact that he is definitely back heavy and will fall over backwards at the earliest opportunity. That's no problem, plenty of mechs don't stand. I'd be willing to let that slide because you could attach him to the floor if he was stable in other ways, which he is not. Using a connection like this, unreinforced, is of course very, very weak and would not be very playable, and potentially might even come loose depending on the quality control between these dark orange plates. Beyond that, some of these parts don't exist, and to be honest, I wasn't really a fan of the look. I wanted to try something else, akin to my original plan, where 3 sides would have studs and 3 sides would have anti-studs, and it would allow us for a little bit more detail. So while this worked as a chibified version, I wasn't happy with it as a final version, so I decided to scale it up. However, I also continued to test and make sure that it would work with its other forms, and while you can only see the cube form here, that was a resounding success. Obviously, you could remove Technic pins from the outside if you didn't want those details showing. Which brings us to my next version of this, and where things started to get a little difficult. Here is the 3x3 cube. I had tried a 4x4 cube, however, given the positioning of the studs needing to be in the middle of each face, it proved much too difficult to bring to fruition without a load of excess gaps. So to minimize gaps, I chose to go by 3x3, and this uses an interesting core with 2 side plates. If I come and hide this top plate in here, you'll be able to see what's going on. Making use of the techniques seen across the various flower pots and sets in recent memory using the Lord of the Rings ring piece, we were able to create the correct spacing to make all of these extend from the main 3x3 cube by a half stud. And as you can see, we've got a stud in the middle of this face, and this face, and an anti-stud in this face. And those are both in C shapes that interlock around the cube for a reason. It's actually making use of a variety of new pieces, such as this 3x3 rounded plate that came out this year, and it allows for a lot more coloration that could obviously vary with versions. There's 2 grey bands that run around the top, as well as some more detailing representing some of the circles and scrolls, and then some of the colouring in the middle. And if you look right in the middle, you can see some blue parts, maybe for some core energy. However, this new model, while looking fantastic and a lot better, brings another set of problems. Number 1, and most importantly, that's 46 parts. That means that a model with 27 of these cubes is going to be looking at more like 500-ish parts rather than anything else, which is insane and deeps way too into my budget. Not to mention, a bigger scale brings more structural problems, and as you'll see in a minute, this one was potentially even less stable than the last. Although it would make a great shelf piece, that was not my goal when setting out to include him in a set, and this is proving very frustrating. So let's take a look at what came next. And as you can see, huge. It was absolutely huge. Everything is scaled up here, and it's absolutely massive, way bigger than the previous model and way bigger than intended. However, from a cube perspective, the cubes work perfectly. All that development plans that went into it and all the different angles mean that they're all equally spaced and look great from every angle, more so than the fairly simple pattern over here on this version. They also connect together, if so rather weakly, presenting another structural flaw, and this would definitely not fly up here given the weakness of the connection. More so than over there, where I think it probably would have held, this one is about 4 times as big and therefore has so much more weight attached. As previously mentioned, of course, it's also a whopping 1,264 unique parts, which is absolutely insane. And definitely wouldn't be viable in a set, given that that was my parts budget for the entire set that this was supposed to come in, and that was supposed to include landscapes, not to mention him being too big for that set anyway. Here's the recolored version of the cube representing the eye stick, of course, the weak spot for the creature, and like the other one, he's perfectly rearrangeable. One last structural problem to throw in the works, of course, is my new Flux design here, using Technic connectors with these in either end, which is not only a legal building technique, but also just incredibly structurally unsound, way more than the last one. The weight's way focused at the back, and there's no way that these arms would, 1, hold, 2, be stable, or 3, potentially even not just sag to the floor. Overall, a fairly disappointing start. Hope is not lost though, and here's where I'm at right now. Now I've got a couple more things to show you, such as other constructs from the Great Sky Island at the beginning of the game, and I'll show you those in just a minute. But more importantly, I wanted to quickly talk about what my new plan is, because it'd be a real shame to take one of the best and most iconic parts of the opening area of Tears of the Kingdom out of the custom set that I'm planning. So how am I going to get around it? Well, I've tried a 3x3 system, and I've tried a 2x2 system, and while a 1x1 system definitely won't work and just look strange, I believe there's hope for making a new part. Now, making new parts is not something we do very often in the custom set showcase, because most of those need to be reserved for figures. However, I plan on making a modification of the Minecraft head element, which follows my same rule, both having 3 anti-studs and 3 studs on it, meaning there'll be a unique cube system to attach between. And given the nature of that piece and the ability to have hollow studs, I have much more faith that bar connections will be stable and other aspects of it will be much stronger. Not to mention he'll be slightly smaller than this one by about a third, I reckon, so probably only coming up to about this height, which will make him much more in scale, if a little tiny, but will definitely cheapify him for the set that I'm going in. Now, there is one drawback to this. Each cube will be made up of 1 piece, so while they fit my parts budget, none of the detail that we'll get here will be seen, and it will all be lost, which is a little bit of a shame, and definitely rather disappointing. However, I'm willing to live with that for the sake of the set. Not only could it be potential of printing or maybe a shell layer, those are all options that I'm potentially considering, but I think in the long run it will look better as 27 sand green cubes at the right scale, joined by teal of course, than an oversized beast which isn't stable and would disappoint its owner. Now, this thing does still have a purpose. I'm very glad I put hours into it because I do think it looks ridiculously cool. I'm going to continue refining the design over the next couple of months, and probably I might consider making him in real life at one point. Definitely not anytime soon. Of course, with the aid of some transparent pieces and some nice scenery underneath to make him look like a proper display piece. I'm thinking similar to like the Star Wars probe droid. I may also put him in a different position or be able to switch in between the three positions. But I'm thinking of turning him into a display style set for my own purpose, not part of the custom set showcase. I would definitely like to see him realised, and I think there's definitely some tweaks that could be done. I'd love to know as well if you guys want instructions for him. I'd be happy to put them up for free, given that the build's so repetitive, although I wouldn't expect anyone to build it because he's going to be really unstable. But in the meantime, of course, that all takes time, and I'd want to refine the design first, so I'd like to know what you guys would like me to change about him. However, as mentioned, we're not done for today, so let's go take a look at those constructs. I knew from the beginning that this wasn't going to be an easy task, and to be honest, when doing my sketches and planning on a piece of paper, I was realising that there was definitely going to be one piece I needed, and that's what you're looking at here. So this is a piece designed, and because it's designed for figures, I didn't hesitate here, so I'm not contradicting what I just said. Oh, and if I zoom back out, you can see it is an interesting start piece. It's in the 3x3 system, so it would fit with the other 3x3 tube elements, as well as the 3x3 tile. However, its only system attachment point is a hole which a bar can be slotted into here, with fairly tight friction. That is so that you could use a bar to stack multiple of these on top of them. Do you recognise where this is from yet? Well, it's from the bottom of a Steward construct. This decorative ring was designed to look like the pieces at the base which they can recess into, and while mine can't do that, it definitely adds the iconic look, and there was nothing really that created this sort of almost complete circle shape. However, I wasn't also creating this piece for one purpose. I was creating it for a second. If we look around the other, it's a complete ring, and that was also important because a lot of the soldier construct designs involve these rings of zonite material that are concentric and lie on top of each other. And while a lot of this can be represented with cones and spaces and teal between, I was specifically worried about the jaws. So this is designed to be a flat surface for those to go on, and then also for any printing if it's necessary. So shall we take a look at how they're used in form? If we move down the line, you're going to see three variants of the soldier construct, 1, 2, and 3. I will not be doing the fourth version. And immediately you can see how the new part has been used. It's been used in concise with the 3x3 dome in order to create a mouth-like shape which can actually oscillate up and down on this blue rod. I think this is actually a pretty versatile piece, and I'm really glad that I introduced it, even if it's just going to be used within this line. You can see the technique I've used to go for the arms here to represent the little rings that the blue power flows through, and then they attach weapons to the end, of course. These aren't the finalized designs. Is using the Doc Ock tentacle design from the Daily Bugle, alternating between the minifigure superhero pieces and the polo stud, and then all building into this core where they're attached by bar pieces. The cone was actually fantastic at creating a more bottom conical shape, and they've got a stamp piece at the bottom to be a stud for them to attach to the base. As mentioned, of course, this is the key piece that they're working here, and this is for the jaw. It just creates that more gap. I'm sure there's a reference image somewhere on screen. Up to this dome, of course, then that brings us into the top of the head. I was able to represent a fairly accurate shape, and obviously with printing this will look a lot better between this dome piece and this wedge piece that comes down, and then just used a variety of blades for the different head pieces on the top. Version 2 adds a couple minutes of ornamentation, and really the only changes are to the axe-shaped blade on his head, and then of course the orange pieces down the side to represent that more colour coming in for the higher versions. And then version 3, exact same body again, but the head is even more elaborate with a giant sword on top, the white flecks that start to guard the sides of the third version, and of course the more orangey colour as well. But of course, these aren't the only constructs. We have the captains here, and the captains actually don't make use of my new piece, and these are the only ones that are actually viable without a completely new mould, at least in my opinion. Now, there obviously are some recolours we'd be waiting for, such as the minifigure superhero stand piece, and obviously you could substitute stuff like the cattle horns, but the main cone pieces up here, as well as the boat tile and of course the horn pieces are actually available, and you can see the three different variations here as the horn grows. Now obviously there are multiple eyes and that would all be printed. I did try a brick built solution, but I didn't think it would work, and I think these look absolutely fantastic as a set. I can imagine that these are going to populate a lot of the new sets. Maybe I shouldn't have spoiled them all. And then, of course, last is the Steward construct, and this one obviously needs a heavy dose of printing. Once again, the other purpose that this was designed for was to have the concentric rings down the bottom. Again, given the scale, I've shrinked it down to 2 to give you more of an image of rather than an accurate representation. And you can see that the arms are curving around into these glove pieces here to represent the hands. You've got the drawer, which of course should be more rounded, but there isn't really a 1x2 piece that would work here, so this would just be printed with the sweeping bell broom symbol. You've got the small eggs represented on the top. I did try using the egg piece, but it was just too big. And then the neck coming out of a bracket into a face using a relatively new wedge piece here to get a more friendly face shape, otherwise using obviously similar prints, more eggs on the top, and then the earrings represented with this handle piece at the bottom of some stamps. I am shocked with the fact that these actually worked. A lot of R&D went into these, the same as of course the Flux construct, and I'm excited to be using them in sets. Hopefully you guys are looking forward to seeing how they'll look with printing, of course, but also in the sets that they'll be involved in, as I'm going to spread them out, I think. Some of these variants I don't even know if they'll be included, like maybe I'll only have captains 1s or 2s, because you've got to bear in mind, of course, not too many sticker limits as well, or prints I should say, for these guys on the cones, and their faces, they'd all be prints. But of course there's variation to come and more options available to me, but maybe I won't even include some of these, but I wanted to see them all here, so I've got my full options available to me, and I'm much happier with these in the Flux construct. So I wouldn't give up, I hope, on the Flux construct yet, but these are definitely my stronger candidates, and you'll be seeing these working their way into sets very soon. Now obviously there's a whole load of sets to build and a lot more development to go, so in the next couple of weeks you'll still be seeing some different content. Next week I'm going to provide you with my initial thoughts on Tears of the Kingdom. Don't worry, no story spoilers, just like my initial thoughts after the first couple of weeks of playing, as I've experienced a lot of the game now and there's a lot I want to talk about just in a non-LEGO capacity even. And then beyond that I've got more castle parts to share with you guys, and then also a video about the Mario announcement that sort of went under the radar for LEGO Mario, and where I think the relationship with Nintendo is now that we're in summer 2023, because I think big changes are coming. So in the meantime, have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.